Hello, Trombone Internet. This is Chris Van Hoff, assistant to the regional manager of the International Trombone Festival. We at the festival, of course, are huge fans of the pod, and we are really excited to invite you to attend this year's 2024 International Trombone Festival at TCU in Fort Worth, Texas. Dave Begnosh is our host. We have the world premiere of a brand new double concerto for trombone and piano with the Fort Worth Symphony. We have the American Brass Quintet. We have late night jazz featuring a Latin jam session. Like, everything is happening. All the cast will be there. It's the best hang in the world, and we hope to see you there. You can register for the festival still online at www.internationaltrombonefestival.com, and it's happening the last week of May. So go register. We'll see you in Texas.
Welcome to the Trombone Retreat, podcast of the Third Coast Trombone Retreat. Today on the podcast, we talk to Jim Nova, second trombonist of the Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra. My name is Sebastian Vera, and I'm joined as always by Nick Schwartz. How's it going, friend?
Oh, it's great. It's really great. It's been an awesome week.
It's the most wonderful time of the year, some might say. Thanks so much to our Patreon subscribers. Been having a lot of fun with it, and we have a lot coming up. So thank you to everyone. If you're interested, check out our Patreon, patreon.com/trombone retreat. Subscribe to the podcast. And most importantly, if you appreciate the podcast, tell a friend.
Yeah, just yell it from on high.
Hashtag grow the show. So we had Mr. James Nova, both of our good friends, on. This has been a long time coming. We've been really looking forward to having him on here. And it was just a really great, awesome personal talk. And you'll learn a lot of insight about him, especially if you only know him from his mini recordings.
Yeah, I appreciated kind of, we tend to, when we hang out, be real silly and not necessarily so serious. I appreciated him going into some deep stuff in his past, and, that's always hard to do.
Yeah, it's always a challenge. Like, he's been such a good friend to me here in Pittsburgh, always been very welcoming and encouraging and supporting my career, and he's been a good friend to you. And it's always weird, like, interviewing your friend that you know so well, but in a way there's some advantages there too, because you really know a lot about them, and so there's an instant comfort level. So we're really excited to share this interview with you guys. This episode is brought to you by Houghton Horns. Our guest Jim Nova plays Shire's trombones and Greg Black mouthpieces, which are sold in quantity at Houghton Horns. He also plays a Tyne contra, and Nick, this is amazing, so check this out. For the next 30 days, with the offer code NOVA, you will get 25% off Tyne trombones at Houghton Horns. They are the exclusive dealer of Tyne trombones in America. So if you've been curious, this is the time.
It's a time for Tyne. Well, hold on a second. So let me do a little bit of quick math. Math.
Pull out that Juilliard math degree.
I'm going to use my abacus. Carry the 7. Carry the 4. Minus 12. Okay. With my trusty abacus, I've figured out that an $8,000 trombone would be $6,000 with that.
Whoa, that is a lot of money to save.
If you're interested in Tyne trombones, now is the time with offer code NOVA
at houghtonhorns.com.
Please enjoy this episode with Jim Nova.
No, 100%. Okay.
Awesome.
Just like me.
Well, we're 100% excited to hang out with you. See what I did?
Oh,
that was nice alliteration there.
You can't just teach this stuff,
I know. Yeah.
You gotta study music. That's where I learned all my podcasting skills.
Right.
So what are you drinking? Nice water there?
Just water? Yeah.
Okay, so one of the three of us will be responsible during this interview. That's good to know.
I mean, there's stuff in here other than water. But, I'm just kidding.
You're the DP, the designated podcaster.
The designated podcaster?
Cut it out. Never mind.
That's
DP.
probably good to have. That's staying in. I want all your joke fails to stay in, Nick. This is important. You gotta stay honest. No, I thought it was kind of funny. I laughed on.
I think you need to learn that harmonic singing thing that I sent you guys the other night. That dude who sings in that gospel quartet. That I remember, the guy who sings like the pedal C's and
down there.
I I must have watched that 50 times and laughed every time. I couldn't believe it.
Just to re-mention something we were talking about earlier, you're coming on. We're hanging out at night, which is, if you know, Gym Nova is prime Gym Nova time, because this is like it's 8 o'clock at night, so that's basically like noon for you.
Yeah, that's when I enter flow state.
all the recordings have been made like super late at night, and you're coming off watching yelling at the TV for 3 hours during the Steelers game, so we're in a perfect mindset.
Hold on, you said that wrong. It's Stillers.
The Steelers game.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you're either yelling at the TV. You're yelling at the TV for one of three reasons: either the refs made a crappy call, or the Steelers had some takeaway that went against them, or they score in the last few seconds and like literally, I mean, I said to Lindsay after I finished this game, I was like, if I'm going to keep rooting for this team, I think I need to start seeing a cardiologist, like I'm just, my heart can't take it, like, it's just too much.
Well, it's between the Stillers and all the pierogies eaten in the city of Pittsburgh.
You're just going to throw out every Pittsburgh cliche in like the next 5 minutes?
Well, the one thing, okay, let me get into this. Why does everything have to come with French fries in Pittsburgh?
Salads, sandwiches.
I really don't know. I've been here.
I love
now.
French fries, but like my favorite was we went to a Mexican place and I got a breakfast burrito. And they were like, "Oh, we're so sorry." We're like, "Oh, we're so sorry, we forgot your French fries." And I was like, "I didn't order French fries." Like, "Oh no, it comes inside of it, and like we forgot to put them in." I was just like, "Okay, like what? Why?"
I mean, I'd have to guess it's from Primanti's being like among the first people to do that. It's like a very famous sandwich in Pittsburgh if you've never heard of it, and they put fries and coleslaw in the sandwich. And they did it because like factory workers often had a very short break between shifts. So they would pack like the entire meal in the sandwich so they could just get all the, whatever.
Well, another part of that was
maybe that's just stuck around.
Another part of that was that the truck drivers would come down the strip district and like they would like slow down and somebody would hop on and hand them the sandwich and they'd hand them the cash and then they'd keep going, like, so it was like, you're
the stuff.
Yeah, it's like so they could eat and not stop, It was pretty nuts. Pretty nuts.
Welcome back to Pittsburgh Sandwich Talk with James Nova, Nick Schwartz, and Sebastian Vera.
Exactly.
We'll be taking callers. Well, speaking of food, didn't you grow up basically in a pizza shop?
Yeah.
How old were you when your dad started running that?
Before I was born, my dad had a pizza restaurant when I was growing up. So that's why, I was 180 pounds in 8th grade, I was like a fullback by the time I was in 8th grade, but
Jim was a sturdy boy.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, when I got to high school, I remember going to my first PE class, like, gym class. And like the teacher was the football coach and he was like, "Nova, get over here." Like that. And he really wanted me to play. He wanted me to, but my dad kind of talked me out of it. He was just like, "You're a really good musician. Are you sure you want to risk breaking your hands or your arms or whatever to play football?" And I was like, yep. But he basically talked me out of it.
All the money's in trombone. You got to stick with trombone.
Yeah, exactly.
Millions of dollars you'll make in sports.
Exactly. No, my dad grew up, started a restaurant like before I was even born. That wasn't his initial plan. I mean, he is a trained musician. He wanted to be, a player and a teacher and stuff. But my dad plays the accordion. And when they moved here,
amazing.
Yeah. And he's like incredible at it. Like he can play Winter from the Four Seasons and like Beethoven piano sonatas on accordion. It's nuts, He went to a music school in Germany when he was a kid, when he was young. He went to this music school in Trossingen, Germany, and he actually worked with Paul Hindemith.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Paul Hindemith, at that point, it was long after the war, the Second World War was over, and he would go and do these like residencies in places. You know how like a guest artist will come and like park it for a weekend or something at a particular place. And so he came to this school that my dad, like was studying at, and he like worked with him. And there's all these, those like kammer music pieces that Hindemith wrote, those like the chamber music pieces. There's a bunch of them that have accordion, and they're actually from that like residency. Like he wrote all these accordion instead of using piano. It was like a piano quartet, but it had accordion instead of piano. Like string quartet with accordion and stuff like that. And they're really cool. And
I'm just imagining your dad having like the secret lost Hindemith accordion sonata like underneath the floorboards of his bedroom.
Yeah, he's waiting until like it's in his will to like pass to me or something, right? But yeah, I mean, he studied theory and composition and all that kind of stuff. Like, and then when my brother was about 5, it was in the early 70s, they decided to come to the U.S. from Istanbul, Turkey. Yeah, that's my little like ethnic background joke that I make, is that when I was about 12 or so, I remember asking my dad, saying, okay, so let me get this straight, Dad. Like, you and Mom are born in Istanbul, Turkey, but we're not Turkish. We have Nova it's an Italian last name, but we're not Italian. We're actually 100% Albanian. So why is it that I speak fluent Greek? And it was like, are we in some kind of Balkan witness protection program or something? Like, did you inform on some like,
you must not ask questions,
and
James.
we had to like flee the entire area and come to the U.S. or something, and just that's my great grandparents fled Albania during the communist revolution and fled to Istanbul, and that's why my parents were actually born there in Istanbul. And the Balkan conflict between the Turks and the Greeks over Cyprus, the island of Cyprus. My dad served in the Turkish military, and he just was like, he had a young family. My mom, my older brother, and because I just have one sibling, and he's like, I want to go to America. I want a better life for our family, and so he came to the U.S. in the 72 or something like that, 1972. And that's, the aftermath of the Vietnam War. So the country was kind of, not in the greatest place. And turns out he couldn't.
Unlike now.
He could. Yeah, exactly. Turns out he had a hard time making a living as an accordion player. Go figure.
Was that his plan?
Yeah, he just wanted. They immigrated to New York City, and he was trying to be a musician in New York City, and he just realized, I can't do this. And he knew the restaurant business because my grandfather my dad's dad ran this really big restaurant that had its own like stockyard out in the countryside and all this, like a big operation. And so my dad knew that business. So he just went to night school and got like, whatever certifications he needed and started working in the restaurant business. And when he would interview, like one of his first jobs was working for a hotel restaurant or something. And when he went in, he put on his resume that he speaks 7 languages, because he does. He speaks 7 languages. And the interviewer was like, wait a minute, you speak 7 languages? How do you keep them all straight? And he says, well, I have a switch behind my ear and I click to the appropriate language, And apparently the guy like leaned forward to like look at behind his ear. My dad was like, ha ha ha, So, that was when by the time I was born, my dad was already rolling in his own restaurant. Like he had started this pizza place, and my mom and him, I mean, this is what's interesting about my background, is that for me, my parents were like literally partners in everything, business partners, family, everything. And so they ran that business together, and my mom was this incredibly gifted pastry chef. She made all those amazing Greek and Turkish pastries and stuff, baklava, kataifi, all that stuff, all from hand, all by
Very
hand
complicated
too.
Stuff.
Yeah, like she would make her own phyllo dough, like from scratch. It's insanely hard.
That gives me nightmares as a person who loves to cook. That's so hard to do.
Yeah, but she loved it. It was like a passion for her. She really she was so meticulous, and so. I remember the table she would make it on. It was this big round table, and she would just roll it out until it was like translucent,
So you came from a family of hard workers, which is very clear. And every time I've heard you talk about your dad and your mom, do you draw a lot of, I mean, how much do you see like culturally, like Albanian culturally, do you draw from like that kind of work ethic, or is that just your parents, or?
That's genetics versus, nurture versus nature kind of stuff. Yeah. I mean, I know that, I mean, one of my favorite stories to tell about my dad was, when I was around that same age where I was like, oh, are we in the Balkan Witness Protection Program? I remember coming home with a report card that had all A's and 1 B plus. And he just looked at it and he was just like, pointed to the B plus. He's like, what is this? What is this? These must all be A's. And I was like, I worked as hard as I could. I did the best I could. And he's like, no excuses. No excuses. There are 24 hours in a day. You will find a way to make the impossible possible. And I was like, rolled my eyes and I'm like, who talks like that? It was so incredulous. And, he wasn't being mean. He wasn't like taskmaster kind of thing. He was more like, look, you can do better than this. I know you can do this, and what's funny is that, fast forward, I don't know, 20 plus years later, after my dad retired from the restaurant business, he decided to go back into music and start writing music and start like taking lessons and studying and stuff like that. And he actually wrote an entire CD's worth of music for me with orchestra, like solos with orchestra. It's the first recording I ever made. And we went to Bulgaria and recorded it with the Bulgarian Radio Symphony. We did this whole CD, and it was quite the adventure to share with him. We stayed in these like converted barracks that were like now hotels in Sofia, Bulgaria. Beautiful, beautiful city. And the orchestra was amazing, and they were literally the perfect orchestra to record that music because they, their Balkanic stylization was part of their culture. So after that whole thing was over, I said, so you need to make piano reductions of all these pieces. You need to do and he was like, oh, Jim, it's so much work to do that. I don't know. And I was like, no excuses. There are 24 hours in a day. You will make the impossible possible. And he was like, oh, you are using my words against me. And I was like, you're damn right I am.
Listen to Nesty.
Yeah, exactly.
So when you speak with him, do you speak in Greek?
We sometimes do, but it's just easier for us to talk in English speak in English because he's so like his English is about 10,000 times as good as my Greek, and and I was real hell on wheels as a kid. Like he tried to get me to go to Greek school, like on Saturday mornings, like to learn how to actually read and write and grammar, all that kind of stuff. And I wouldn't go. I refused to go. I was just an insufferable kid, believe it or not.
Slapping the culture in the face.
And I really wish I did. I look back on it and he was right. I regret it. I regret not doing it because I can't and the funny thing is I think in English, but my pronunciation is fine. So when I speak Greek, I basically sound like Yoda. Like I'm just talking, my word order is all backwards, and like Greek people look at me. They're like, "Why are you talking like that? Did you?"
So they get what you're saying, but it sounds very like interesting.
It's all backwards, and so like, did he have too much ouzo or what? Like it's just.
I have ouzo at home. I could pour an ouzo for all of us.
Ooh, man, that is some serious stuff.
If you spoke in Greek, but like Yoda, but with the actual Yoda voice, that would be like the full.
Then you would time travel.
Then like you'd be the coolest person there, I'm sure. So grew up in Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
When did trombone come into the picture?
Well, my dad, it wasn't even a discussion with his kids. He's like, you will play an instrument. It's not even like, oh, do you want to or whatever. My brother and I played instruments, and I think my dad played trumpet in the Turkish military band when he was, and he also played accordion like for nightclub gigs and stuff like that. But he played trumpet, and I think that was kind of what led my brother. My brother's 8 years older than I am, and he played trumpet. And then when I got to like fourth grade, they said, all right, pick an instrument. And I wish I had some kind of romantic story about picking the trombone in terms of like, oh, I like the whatever, I saw some great player play it. But honestly, it was like they needed trombone players. And I was just like, oh, it's kind of a cool looking instrument. And so I thought I'll just play that, And so my parents bought me like a little Yamaha student model instrument that I basically played on until my freshman year of high school. So I got pretty lucky with good band directors and stuff. And like I said, I was a little bit of a problem child. I was a bit of a scrapper, shall I say, when I was a little kid, like 12, 13, around that age. I was kind of like, let's just put it this way. My parents always got one of two phone calls: either come pick up your son, he's in the office for fighting again, or come pick up your son, he's in the emergency room with some kind of wound that he received while fighting. I just was hell on wheels. And I think I remember the moment my dad decided we were going to move from East Hartford, Connecticut to South Windsor, which was like completely different extremes, because East Hartford was kind of getting not such a great place to live. And that was part of the reason. Like, the school was just, a lot of fighting going on, a lot of gang activity and stuff like that was starting to happen.
So were you instigating a lot of these things, or were people just saying stuff and you wouldn't back down? I mean, what?
No, I wasn't instigating. What would happen a lot of time? I was kind of a big kid for that at that age. Like, I was one of the bigger kids. I had a growth spurt or whatever, and I was like the kid who these kids would come and find if they were being bullied by somebody, and like so and
the
so
enforcer on a hockey team.
Yeah, and it was
goon.
Like. They'd be like, hey, he took my lunch money. He beat me up and took my lunch money. And then I'd go over and be like, hey, so what's the deal? Why don't you give me your lunch money back? Give me his lunch money back. And then, and I would start fighting, and that's just.
You enjoyed it. You weren't even getting anything out of it. You were just like, clearly you needed some sort of outlet, right? So like, did finding music like help kind of get this energy out?
Well, yeah. And it was, I just remember the moment that my dad realized that we had to move because the environment I was in was so bad for me. I came home, and, one of the times I'd been sent home for fighting, and he was like, Jim, you can't solve all your problems with your fists. And I said, my response to that was, look, Dad, some kids just need to get hit. It's just the way it is, and he was like, he put his hands in it. He was just like, put his face in his hands. He was like, I think we moved. I think our apartment went on the market like that day, I think and then when we moved to South Windsor couldn't have been more different. It was like a really nice, kind of quiet, sleepy, rural town, suburb town, great football team. And the band director in South Windsor, like in the middle school program, was a trumpet player, played in one of the military bands. Like, great. He was basically my first teacher. And then when we moved when I got to high school, the band director in my high school was the second bassoon player in the Hartford Symphony. So it was like I was, But you're right. I definitely, that all of a sudden I realized that music was something that I really enjoyed, and I had talent, and so I went. I had all my energy. And there was no brawling culture in South Windsor. It was not like, East Hartford was kind of, it just been sort of overrun, I think it's a lot better now, but, a lot of families left the area where we were living because it was just getting so bad, like that kind of stuff.
So you didn't try to become like the mob boss of Windsor when you moved over there?
Well, let's just say I had some quote unquote uncles who were not actually blood relatives, but uncles who, always seemed to have brand new hand-stitched or handmade Italian suits and drove brand new Lincoln Continentals, and, would say things to me like, oh, hey, Jimmy, if you ever have a problem you can't solve, you come talk to Uncle Thanasi, and I'll sort it out for you. And I was not. I think, and my dad kind of hates talking about it. Like, I think he doesn't. Like, I've tried to sort of get him to talk about it, and he's like, it's in the past. So I don't want to talk about it. He just doesn't want to.
No one listens to this. It's okay.
Well, at least about my family.
Right. So you went on to, you got to, I imagine you had a connection with your band director and got to study with George Sanders in the Hartford Symphony.
Yeah.
That's a big step for a young person in was it high school where you started studying with him? Yeah.
My freshman year of high school, my dad was like, he went to my band director and he said, I want Jimmy to have lessons, and I want him to have private lessons. And so Lou Lazzarini is his name. He was the second bassoon player in the Hartford Symphony. And
wait, is he Italian?
Maybe just a little bit. You know?
He's from Duluth, Minnesota.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But he was terrific. And he was like, oh, you should study with my colleague, George Sanders, who, you know, is this great teacher, and lots of former students of his have gone on to great musical careers. And it was great. It was terrific. I mean, I showed up for my first couple lessons, and I remember him being like, you know, all right, can you, you know, I was 15. So, you know, he's like, all right, can you play, you know, these scales? You know, he gave me some scales to play. I remember when I had to play a B natural, you know, I didn't have a trigger. It was just a straight horn. So I remember putting my slide on the floor and walking back from it while playing so that I could reach, you know, let go of the slides, and it was sitting on the ground. And I'd walk back from it to play the B natural, and then I'd walk back up to it and pick it up again to you know. And he was like, "Oh, that's inventive," because my arms are too short to reach B natural. You know, I was 14. 14.
Resourcefulness.
I was 14 because I
short little Albanian T-Rex arms, huh?
It's true. Well, relative to it's true. I'd argue if I disagreed, you know, but you know, every time I buy a suit, my chest size, I always have to have the sleeves taken in. Like my arms are relative to my chest, my arms are really short. You know, I'm a Glenn Dodson student through and through. Let's just put it that way. For those of you listeners that don't know,
problem. My arms are so damn long. Like I have to just roll up my sleeves because no dress shirts ever look correct. So it just looks.
Well, Sebastian,
ridiculous.
You're kind of like a walking version of the inflatable tube man that they put out in front of used car dealerships.
Our Patreon members are getting a show right now.
Exactly.
So played the youth symphony there. I mean, we could cover. There's so many career highlights that like we won't even have time in a single podcast.
Well, I mean, the thing is there's a very important event that, you know, some of your listeners don't know about, that really kind of is a big fork in the road for me. It happened my freshman year of high school. And it was, you know, in the spring of my freshman year of high school, George Sanders, my teacher, he went to my parents and he said, look, your son is really gifted and he really needs a serious instrument. This Yamaha student model, he's completely outgrown it. He really needs like an instrument with an F attachment. And you know, back then it was like you either played a Bach 42 or a Conn 88H, you know, that's like, those are your choices, you know? And he played on a Bach 42. So he was like, well, you know, I think he should get either, they were like, he should get a Bach 36 with a valve. And then if he goes into music for a living, like he goes into college for that, then he can get a Bach 42 or something. Or you can just skip that step and get him the Bach 42 now. And they were like, let's just get him the better one now. Let's just get him the bigger one now. And so they bought me in April of my freshman year of high school. So that would have been like 1989. They got me this Bach. And I mean, it was like, first of all, I was going from like a 12C with a Yamaha student model instrument to a Bach 42 with a 5G. It was like the ground fell out from under me, you know, but you couldn't pry it out of my hand. I mean, I was just playing it nonstop. And unfortunately, though, what we didn't realize, you know, obviously at the time, was that my mom was in pretty poor health. She had always kind of wrestled with weight issues, and she had heart issues, and that's kind of a thing in my family, like heart issues, which is why I try to stay so on top of exercise and fitness and stuff, is because it's in my genetics, you know. And so in that summer in July, she suffered a massive heart attack and she didn't make it. And I was actually the one, like at the time, because my dad and my mom ran the restaurant together, you know, she had felt ill the night before. And what we didn't realize was that was like a warning shot. It was like she had a minor heart attack and she didn't realize it. And not that it would have mattered. I mean, her heart was in terrible shape. And then the next day she stayed home, and my brother went to the restaurant with my dad to run it. And then she stayed home and just kind of, convalesced in bed and just hung out. And I was, of course, playing my instrument. And it was like, it was almost like she knew something was going to happen, because she wasn't the most verbally demonstrative parent. I mean, she was the kind of parent who would like come into school assemblies that she wasn't allowed to be at just because she knew I was going to play in it or something. Like she would like sneak in the back and watch and stuff, I played at a school, I played like the national anthem at a school assembly or something, and she would want to be there. She was at every performance, and she bought me that Bach, like with money that she had been like sort of squirreling away, And so that day, I remember she kind of called, she said, Jimmy, come up here. And I brought her a glass of water, and she brought me in tight. She gave me a big hug, and she said, I just want you to know I love you. And just promise me you and your brother will always get along. And at the time she wasn't that kind of mom. She didn't say, she wasn't like, oh, I love you every day. Like she was not that way. Neither is my dad, So I found it kind of peculiar, And then I went back downstairs, and then I heard this loud crash, and I ran upstairs, and she had a massive heart attack. The heart attack was so massive that it basically had stopped her in her tracks. Like she fell out of bed trying to stand up, and man, I was the one who had to call 911 and watch as the ambulance came, and they did all those things that we sort of see on TV, like defibrillator, call, clear, all that kind of stuff. I watched that happen in person, and I was 15 years old. So, I remember they took, I called my dad, and he raced home, and then they took her to the hospital, and I stayed at the house while my brother and my dad went to the hospital. And when they came home, they came back, they didn't have cell phones or anything, like, no texting or anything. I just was sitting there waiting. And when my dad and my brother came home, I saw my dad get out of the car, and when he looked at me, I saw the look on his face, and I just knew it was she didn't make it. And I like yelled. I yelled so loud that I lost my voice, and I like actually coughed up a little blood. Like I was just, I couldn't. It was so dramatic, and I don't mean to get off too far on this dramatic thing, but it's important because up until that point, trombone was. I had fun doing it. I was good at it. It was something I did. It was cool to be good at something, and and that kind of thing. And after that, in the aftermath of her dying, because music was such a big part of my life, like it was like all of a sudden I hit this fork in the road, and that's when music stopped being something that I do, and it became something that I am. I was like, I realized, because I just sunk myself into playing. I would play like, I remember noodling around with like the Pavane for a Dead Princess, because that's about a person dying young. I mean, my mom was only 51. I'm 4 years away from the age that my mom was when she died. I can't even fathom that, and it was such a crushing, I mean, it would be crushing in any family, but like my dad in one day not only lost his wife and the mother of his kids, but he lost his business partner. He lost his best friend. It was just, and watching him withstand that, my brother and my mom always had a little bit of a troubled relationship, and my brother and I were kind of a little bit, scrappy with each other. And I think that's why she kind of knew, and she was like, make sure you and your brother always get along, so that's when music just took a hard turn. And that fall, the following September, my dad had a subscription to the Hartford Symphony. He would go with my mom. Like they would go to concerts all the time. Dad still has a subscription to the Hartford Symphony. And I remember they were doing Mahler 5, and I had never heard Mahler 5 before. And he took me to see that. And I remember after, the way, it starts so funeral march stormy, and it ends so, triumphantly. I just like, I was transfixed. And I remember after the concert was over, I pointed, I was just like, yeah, I want to do that. I want to make that kind of music. And, my dad was, because he was like, what are you pointing at? And I was like, that, I want to do that, And after that, I was literally like a lightning rod. I was like, I will be a musician. I'm not going to, and I'm lucky in that way. I didn't have any confusion about it. It was, and because my dad had been attempted to be a musician and it didn't work out and stuff, he was immediately nervous,
Mm-hmm.
But I just kept cranking out the all state festivals, regional festivals, playing in this thing. I think in my high, I was playing. I played the horn parts in woodwind quintets. I played the horn parts in brass quintets because we didn't have French horn players, and I was doing everything. I played in so many different groups, and then my dad called the New England Conservatory and asked, do you have a youth orchestra up there? And they were like, yeah, we have like 5 of them. And so I went up, and on Saturdays I would make the drive up to I would get on a bus and go to Boston, and my uncle would pick me up and bring me to youth orchestra rehearsal and stuff.
No, was this your real uncle or your
Yeah. Yeah, this was my actual
Uncle Thanasius.
It wasn't Thanasi, or it wasn't Bilo or anybody like that,
But, Uncle Bilo.
Uncle Bilo, yes. We make small delivery on the way. Don't worry. No, but no.
Don't stay in car.
Close your eyes to me.
Just look out this left window. Well, I remember one. To give you an idea how driven I was to play. My dad and he was driving me to the bus station, and we were running late, and we were about a block away from the bus station, and I unclipped my seatbelt to like reach in the back seat to grab all my stuff because I was just going to literally hop out of the car and go. Well, this guy ran a light, and we ended up in a head-on collision with this car at an intersection, and I smashed my head into the windshield. I got out of the car and I was like, ow, and then I looked and I was like, oh. And the policeman showed up and they're like, we have to put you in an ambulance. You have to go, you probably have a concussion or whatever. I was like, what? No. And I grabbed my horn. I was like, I'm not missing a Shostakovich 5 rehearsal. And I walked the rest of the way to the bus station and went to rehearsal.
Not advised.
No, not advised. But it just shows you my singular, path that I had.
And first of all, thank you for sharing that story with us. And I can only imagine I'm sure, especially at the age you were, it's probably so vividly, every moment of that is probably so still vivid in your mind. Yeah. Through this tragedy, first of all, what a beautiful thing that the last thing you remember her saying to you, or one of the last interactions, was such a beautiful, positive, loving thing. I mean, that's rare, and that's wonderful. But I mean, through this tragedy, it sounds like if there is one beautiful thing from it, is that it gave you the gift of being able to channel your grief and focus into this music career, and really light a fire at an age where, a lot of young, talented people, often have trouble being motivated at that age, right?
Sure.
It's not an easy thing to do. I mean, we see a lot of young, talented people, and it sounds like having that father around that kind of understood what it might take, and I'm sure he was grieving at the same time while raising sons. I mean, which you probably don't even. It's hard to fathom that until you're older, right? Like, all that kind of stuff. But
yeah. Just real quick, I want to interject. Like I remember, I laugh now, and my dad and I were sort of laughing and crying at the same time. Like, I remember a couple weeks after my mom died, my dad and I were like trying to figure out how to work the damn washing machine, because my mom had done all that stuff. We were like two dogs trying to start a car. We were like, I don't know what to push that. And I remember us looking at each other and laughing and crying at the same time. And so it's just a funny aside there, but you're totally right. I mean, I was very lucky that my dad was as strong as he was and could kind of handle that, but I'm sorry, say you were about to say something. I interrupted you. What?
Yeah. Don't do that again, please.
I'm sorry. What?
No. Yeah. So the next phase is pursuing
College.
this dream and auditioning for schools.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how did we get to Curtis, and did
what,
you know much about it?
What's that word? What's
Curtis?
Is it kind of like Juilliard?
Yeah, it's like Juilliard, except it's free, and it was free a long time ago. So, no.
Well, good thing. You usually have to pay for good things, so here we are.
Right.
No,
I'll think about that next time
mind.
I look at my student loan bills. No, just kidding. No, I mean, it was. I kind of always had this weird. New York City, when I was a kid, we used to go, because it's so close, so we used to go down there all the time. And I didn't really have an interest in New York City for some reason. I don't know why, because it's such an incredible music city. But I really wanted to go to Eastman. That was like the school that, because of Emory Remington, all that stuff, and so that was kind of what I focused on. I auditioned at New England Conservatory, Northwestern, Eastman, and then, as sort of a backup, I auditioned at, University of Connecticut and Hart School of Music and stuff, because they were right in my backyard. But my teacher, George Sanders, he was like, you should really audition for Curtis, and I was like, what's that? And he says, well, he started naming players, which I didn't, like Joe Alessi and Blair Bollinger and Mark Lawrence and stuff. And I was like, who are they? And he explained to me who they were. And he says, Glenn Dodson is the teacher there. He's this incredible guy. And I was like, okay. I was this kid who basically came out of the cornfields of Connecticut with a trombone over my head. I didn't know any of that stuff. And he said, oh, but it's free. It's full tuition if you get in. They only take one trombone player a year. And my dad was like, oh, yeah, you're going to audition there. Yeah, for sure. And
Jim's like, I will fight all of them. I will win.
When's the combat? When's the gladiator round? But I went there, and it was like a museum, and I didn't know anything. I didn't know that I should be nervous. I was just kind of like, whoa, wow, those guys are real. And I walked into the room to meet Glenn Dodson, and the auditions at Curtis when he was the teacher were sort of more like lessons. They were like 15, 20-minute lessons, like you would play and then he would coach you and you'd kind of work together. What I didn't realize at the time, and now of course I know as an adult, is that he was checking out the chemistry between us just as much as he was listening for how well I played, And he said at the end of the audition, he said, all right, so is there anything that you want to play that, if you didn't have the chance to play it, you would feel cheated, and you'd feel disappointed that you didn't get to play it? And I was like, can I play Bolero for you? And, I didn't even occur to me that was gutsy to do, because I was just like, he's like, why do you want to play Bolero? And I was like, I just really like it. And, I think I feel like pretty strong on it. So I played Bolero for him, and he told me later, he was like, I could just tell that you loved playing and that we had such a good rapport and connection. And he's like, I knew that day that you weren't necessarily the most accomplished student I heard that day, but I knew I was going to take you the furthest. I knew we were going to do the best work together of the people I heard.
It's important.
And, yeah. And he's totally right. He was totally right. And so, when I got into Curtis, I got the letter, accepting me into Curtis. It's one of the few times I've ever heard my dad exclaim in joy. Like he was like, yes, great, wonderful. He's just not that verbally demonstrative. Face. Yeah. And the funny thing is like, my mom was definitely kind of a, helicopter mom. I don't know that she would have been comfortable with me going to school in Philadelphia. My dad was terrified of it, just because Curtis at the time didn't have dorms. I know they do now, but at the time you would basically get an apartment right away. So, from the time I was 18, I had my own apartment and paying my own bills and bank account and everything, so it was like hurry up and grow up kind of environment, and going from
with your bare knuckle fighting background. I mean, you're you're ready.
Yeah. Well, definitely some things happened there, but
I just came up with
you got fights everywhere.
I just came up with an idea. You know how there's backyard wrestling or bum wrestling? Yeah. They could do backyard bulk and bare knuckles. And they could go on a VHS.
That probably already exists.
Well, when I first got here, I don't want to skip too many steps, but like when I first got to Pittsburgh, I was going for a run, it was like October, my first season or whatever, I've been here 13 years now, and I was running around this park, and there was like a part of the sidewalk that was sticking up, and I didn't see it in time, and I tripped and I landed on my hands. I caught myself, and my right hand was kind of messed up, and I went to like a insta care or something, and they were like, they x-rayed it, and they said, "Oh yeah, you broke your wrist." And I was like, "Oh no, my right, I got a concert tonight," and they splinted it, and I went and played the concert, and the next week I went to see an orthopedic specialist about it. And he was kind of like this sort of gruff guy, and he took his own x-ray, and he was like, "No, it's not broken." He's like, "See this right here?" And he pointed to this spot in my wrist. He goes, "That's an artifact from an old break from when you were younger." And he's like, "It's not broken. You'll be fine. You just need to, ice it and take care of it, whatever." But then he kind of smiled, and he leaned forward, and he pointed to my knuckles, and he was like, "So, bit of a scrapper, were you?" And I was like, maybe. And he was like, "See all those little lines on your knuckles?" He's like, "Those are all like hairline fractures that have been healed numerous times." He's like, and based on the age of those fractures, he's like, "I'm gonna guess you were like early teens." He's like, "Were you just like punching your way through that time in your life?" And I was like,
"Get out of my head, doctor. I just came because my wrist hurt."
Well, I was like shocked that he could figure that out just by looking at an x-ray, and I was like, maybe. And he was like, "I just thought that
you're asking a lot of questions, Doc. You want to go or something?"
Yeah.
Outside.
Yeah. What is this?
Thanasis.
What is this? An FBI inquiry? What's going on here?
Exactly.
But anyway, yeah. So
Jim, I'm hearing so many stories, and knowing you as a person, it seems like you hurt yourself a lot, and I'm starting to be concerned. all these little injuries.
You talking about
be an
lately?
Artist with like artist hands.
No, one of the first tours we went on, I remember I cut my hair really short, and when I got to the check-in line, Murray Crew, the bass trombone player in the orchestra for a long time, he was there at the check-in line, and he didn't say hello. He just looked at me and he goes, "Whoa, you got like a lot of scars on your head." Just like that. I was like,
that was a good Murray.
I was like, yeah, I kind of do, So anyway, your listeners are like, "Oh, I didn't realize Nova was such a brawler."
They
rehab.
Everyone knows it.
It's a rehab podcast. We're just going to talk about injuries and recovering. Well, just knowing you in conversations we've had, I know showing up to a school like Curtis can be a bit overwhelming. It's very small, a lot of talented people. You have like 12-year-olds that are already like playing concertos with major orchestras. And at first it was a bit overwhelming, right?
Oh, it was, because the culture at Curtis, I don't know if it's still this way, but definitely when I was there, and the culture was kind of like, if you get your degree, you failed. Like it's almost like the highest honor is, "Oh, I have to leave school because I want a job in such and such orchestra, or I'm starting my solo career." I mean, Leela Josefowitz and Hilary Hahn were in one of my English classes. Like it's just crazy. And it was a super high pressure environment, because the level of playing was just so incredibly high, but also like not a lot of people. It was basically an orchestra, and so it was kind of like winning a job. I mean, I played like all the Brahms symphonies before I had finished my freshman year, and so you're just covering all this rep, and you're playing all this stuff, and working with lots of cool guest conductors, and because basically every time a guest conductor would come to conduct the Philadelphia Orchestra, Curtis would have them come in and do like a rehearsal or reading session with the students, and it was extremely high pressure, incredible place, just like a pressure cooker in a lot of ways. I mean, by the time I got to my junior year, I actually almost quit, because I was just I was in my own head. All I could hear was what I didn't like, like I was like, "Oh, I'm not getting better fast enough, and I'm never going to get a job." And I'm just, I was in my own head all the time. And, and Dodson was just so great. I mean, just such a joy. I really got so lucky with the teachers that I had. I mean, George Sanders was amazing for me, and Glenn Dotson was an incredible hero for me. And then in graduate school, when I studied with Norman Bolter, like these people, any one of those pieces are missing, and I'm not here talking to you guys. Like it's incredible. When I was in that real headspace of like, blah, 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 like Dodson was really supportive, but then that's when I met Norman Bolter. And he kind of reconnected me. He's like, what are you thinking about when you're playing? Like, what were the reasons that you got into playing in the first place? And he kind of steered me away from the cliff. And then I got back into, this is why I play. This is why I got back into playing. Like, and he said one of the most important phrases that I'll ever remember, that I can ever thank him for enough. I can't thank him enough for it. Is he said, Jim, just start with what you can do and build on that. Like start with what you can do, and
that's great.
He loves to say like, people always tune to the A of, tune to A when they play an orchestra. What about tuning to the A of attitude? Tuning to the A, and he loves doing stuff like that, alliteration, things like that. And I was like, yeah, you're right. And he basically steered me away. And you got to realize that Norm Bolter and Glenn Dodson had a real affinity for each other, because when Norman was in high school, everyone said, "Oh, you sound like Glenn Dodson. You should go to Curtis." Well, there wasn't an opening at Curtis that year, and then the following summer, Norman was in the Boston Symphony, so there was no chance for him to study. But they always whenever I took lessons with Norman, he would say, "Tell Glenn Dodson hello from his long lost student," and and Dodson was amazing in the sense that he, if you came back from a great lesson, he wanted to hear about it. He wanted you to tell him and like, "Oh, what did you, how did you, what did you get, from him?" And so it was real open that way.
But that's really powerful. What he said. I really like to unpack a little bit what he said to you at that time that you needed to hear. Start with what you know, right? Because I mean, so much of maybe anxiety or career anxiety comes from trying to be too much too soon, or trying to be more than we are, and instead of just accepting where you are now and building from that.
Yeah. It's a position of strength, because then he would say, just have your home base and just, build little satellites out, build little colonize outward, from a position of strength, and he says, right now you're trying to jump out into like an area that you're not ready to be in yet, and I like to combine the two. The thing that my dad said way back when, it's like, start with what you can do so that you can make the impossible possible. I like to combine those two, and, because when you think about it, it's like at that point all I could see was what I didn't know. All I wanted to see was like what I can't do, instead of thinking about, all right, what can I do? Can I add to that? Can I make little gains here and there, And then pretty soon those little gains add up, like every day, just make this a little bit better, make this a little different, And then when you do that, 300 days in a row, all of a sudden you've gone a pretty far distance. But when you asked about auditions, I actually started taking auditions when I was still at Curtis. Like I just wanted to jump into the pool and start doing it, and I always ask like at master classes or whatever, like what number professional audition was Pittsburgh? And, people usually guess somewhere in the 12 to 15 range or something. It was actually my 39th professional orchestra audition. And, as you guys obviously know and teach your students, it's like the truest indication of success in this business is not talent. It's grit. How many times can you do this? Can you brush yourself off, stand up, brush yourself off, keep moving forward, and it takes a lot, it takes a lot of effort in that way.
And that's something, honestly, and don't get too excited that I'm actually giving you a compliment here, but
what?
It's something I've always admired about you. And it's, a lot of people see people that go to like a big school and they think like, oh, they were just kind of destined right away. They're always really good. And they had all the breaks and they had a really good teacher and they never struggled and they win this job. And, people hear your overdose, which we'll get to. And they're just like, I mean, this guy's ridiculous. But being around you And like I've crashed at your house many times when I used to live in New York and I was coming to Pittsburgh, and you and Lindsay were always very generous. No matter what, no matter what we did the night before, you're up at like, I'm still in bed and it's like 8 a.m. and you're doing your routine every morning. And it's so clear. I mean, just hearing about your family and hearing about your parents and the work ethic, that's something you've always had. And then you pair it with having this belief and imagination to not be afraid of, even things that haven't been done yet, like, stuff that you've created. So, I mean, that's, forget I complimented you, but I just wanted to mention that. And if I list the wins here, correct me if I'm wrong. So, auditions, Pacific Symphony, Rhode Island, Vermont, New Haven, Utah in 2001, and then of course Pittsburgh Symphony. So that's, if people can win one audition in a lifetime, that's very exciting. So you've had a lot of success in that regard, but like you said, 39 auditions. So when did you start to like hit a breakthrough? Like what started to make sense?
Well, I remember one of the, I was the runner up to Craig Mulcahy for the second job in National. This was like in 2006, I think. And at that point I had so many runner ups and finalists that I was just kind of like, if I get another runner up, can it be like a punch card? Like I get 6 more runner ups and I just get the next job without an audition, and, cause it was just getting maddening, and Craig is an incredible player and a wonderful guy, and so I didn't feel like cheated or anything. I mean, he just played incredibly well at that audition. And I remember afterwards they said, I talked with Milt Stevens and Matt Guilford and my old friend Steve Dumaine, who I tuba player I went to Tanglewood with, and so, and basically they said Craig was just a more musically interesting. He was just more like lyrical player, and he's like, you're strong as an ox, that kind of thing. And so I was like, okay, I haven't done a recital since my graduate recital at NEC. I hadn't done one, since 1998. And maybe I should do that. Maybe I should start doing some recitals to kind of get more into that kind of mode of playing. And so my friend Heather Connor, who I think she teaches at a school in Minnesota now, pianist, but we went to Curtis together. She was then, at that point, she was teaching at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City. And I said, hey, would you want to like play like a killer recital with me sometime? Like, I think it would be really great for me, for my audition preparation, And she said, yeah, of course. And so we reserved a room, and like, I did this whole themed recital that was like, had a really, this is an interesting foreshadowing of my overdub album, but like, it was a dark, like first half and light second half, so it was like, I played this piece that my dad had written in memory of this cousin of mine.
From light to dark?
Yeah, it was actually from dark to light this time. Yeah, so
from dark to light.
Yeah, but I played like the Rachmaninoff Elegy in E flat minor. I played this piece that my dad wrote that was really somber, and then the second half was like the Custerhead Sonatina, and I remember I played the De Fay du Danse at the end, and some of my friends were like, "You got to be out of your mind playing the do dance at the end." I was like, but that's where it goes, that's where that piece is a closer. That's not, you can't, even though it's hard to be a closer. But after that recital, I got into, I was like, oh yeah, like solo playing and doing something that, audition preparation is so funny because you have to confine yourself to certain restraints, and you don't always get to play everything you prepare. Whereas a recital, you do what you want, how you want, and you play everything you prepare. And that mindset really changed me. And then the very next audition I took was Pittsburgh. So
that's great.
And it was like, oh, okay, I get it now. And that was what really turned the corner for me, was all those runner-ups finally. So
you're in the Pittsburgh Symphony, you're crushing it. When do overdubs come into play? And why overdubs, and why John Williams?
Well, back in my Curtis days, Glenn Dodson would always have these hangs at his house with the Curtis studio and the Philly Orchestra section. and we would get together at his house and we would play these, he called them bone bashes. And we would just sit down and play at his house. He had this big like basement area that was big, big space. And we would play these crazy arrangements. And the rule was you had to bring something to play. Like you could either arrange it or something you had that you knew or whatever, and you brought it and we would play. And so that's where I started arranging. And, as a little kid, my dad took me to see The Empire Strikes Back with my brother, and I remember just being hooked on the music. I was 6 years old, and he took me. I was like, man, incredible! And that was before I even picked an instrument, actually. So I think that's probably goes a long way to saying why I wanted to pick a brass instrument. Was like I was just so infatuated with that music.
Right.
So John Williams' music was.
I didn't realize that's news to me. I didn't know. In my research, I didn't realize that you like Star Wars and John Williams. Man,
it's a real blind spot.
Fire our interns.
Big blind spot for you there.
Sorry, go on.
But then, when I started arranging and stuff, like I was like, oh, I never even thought to play something on trombones that wasn't originally for trombones, so I started arranging. And then when I got to the Utah Symphony, my old friend and colleague, Rusty McKinney, who was the bass trombone player in the Utah Symphony, he had a trombone choir, and I would start arranging for the group. I played in the group. I sat in the group and played and for years, and we would premiere all these arrangements that I did, and a lot of John Williams stuff, like the Green Hornet, that big flashy solo I play. Like that was premiered in that group. That was in the Utah's Ultimate Trombone Experience. It was called UUTE.
Nerds.
Yeah, nerd alert. Right.
I'm sure that packed the halls.
Actually, it had a really big following. It actually would, every concert we played would get like close to 1,000 people would show up for these concerts. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It was great. Like, because part of it was like, it wasn't just college students. It was like weekend warriors, students, professionals, players. It was a real cultural touchstone that he created there. It was really cool. And we did fun concerts, like it was a lot of lighthearted stuff too. So, I didn't even own a bass trombone at that point, but when I got the Pittsburgh job, part of my job is to be the utility player. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to be playing bass trombone. So maybe it's time for me to get one. And I, got an instrument and started sorting out mouthpieces, all that kind of stuff. And you got to remember that when I was in high school, my band director used to say, Nova, your low range sounds like a cardboard box. That's what he'd say. He'd be like, Nova, when you go into the low register, you sound like a different player and not a good one. So
my snobby reply would be like, what does a cardboard box sound like? That doesn't make sense.
Well, he would have probably said, like you do. But I got a bass trombone, and then the overdubs came about because it was 2012. So I'd been here 3 years, and, as I'm sure you guys can relate, after a while, you get your career moves forward. You start to need new ways to motivate yourself to practice or to develop or to improve or to get into shape for the season, that kind of thing. So I was just like, well, I did this. I've done so many of these John Williams arrangements. Like, what if I just tried to overdub them myself? Like just try to record them myself. And I was like, I didn't know anything about what I was doing. Although the seed was planted when I was still in Utah because, I got my bass trombone. I won the job in Pittsburgh Thanksgiving of 2008, but I didn't start until the fall of 2009. Like I stayed in Utah the whole season just because, many of my mentors had said, it's probably always best for you to start a 10-year run at the beginning of a season so that, you're not just kind of jumping in, because invariably the music director might not see you enough times and then you end up having to spend a whole year. And, I wanted to make sure my leave from Utah was as used as effectively as possible. So I decided to start in the fall instead, So I had that whole year to play, in the Utah Symphony and sort out the bass trombone stuff. And there's this recording studio in Salt Lake that, has done a fair amount of work. In fact, that's where I met my lovely wife, Lindsay, was at a recording session.
My wife.
Yeah. She's a French horn player, and we played on this recording session for the the trailer music to the Johnny Depp remake of the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. We played the trailer.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Oh.
Yeah, that's where we met. And so this studio was.
You watched that movie on your anniversary.
Yeah, we look up the trailer music, and
It's just the trailer.
It was just the trailer music. Yeah, it wasn't the soundtrack. That was, I'm sure, recorded in L.A. But we
in a world.
So that studio called me to do this video game soundtrack for one of the World of Warcraft games, and they were like, "We have 2 bass trombone parts and 3 tenor parts, and we want you to overdub the whole section." So that's where I was like, "Man, this is kind of fun." Doing this, like, and that planted the seed. And then, 2013, I was like, hey, why don't I give that a try? I had no idea what I was doing. I just used Audacity and like a simple USB mic. And friends of mine were like, oh, you should do this when you master it, or you should pan the parts. And I was like, what does a frying pan have to do with it? I had no idea what that even meant, and, they were like, no, you should, blah, 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 and I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. And then people were like, you should put it on this site called SoundCloud, because it's kind of like YouTube, but for music, and that way you could share it easily. I was like, okay. And I thought, like 10 people would listen to it or something. And I sort of got hooked on it. I started to, first of all, it was unbelievable for my playing. Because, obviously recording yourself and listening back is always beneficial, and you can improve so quickly that way. But when you're actually listening back to things, for purposes of making like a full ensemble, it's like the ones and zeros don't lie, And what I found myself getting into too was that it was an environment where probably more like sculpture than music performance. Where I could like craft everything the way I wanted to. I could play things and be like, yeah, that's in tune and in time, but it's not very exciting, So like I could take risks in a way that I would never have the luxury to do in a live performance, And I just found that really addictive. And it would be like, I'd be recording for like 6 hours straight and not even like blink. And my chops would be like, it was incredible. Like the best my face ever feels is when I'm like waist deep in an overdub, like I'm just like in the middle of it. And it's because it's so exciting. You're doing this thing and you're listening back to it. And like when you get it to sound the way you want it to, it's such a incredible rush, and, talk about improving your playing. I never could sight read on alto before I started doing overdubs. Now I can like sight read on alto trombone, and I whenever I'd come into the PSO to play bass trombone, Craig Knox, or our tuba player, would be like, man, it's like really every time you come in with your bass, it's like it's miles better than it was before. It just got me really comfortable with it, and then fast forward to Mr. Schwartz loaning me his contrabass trombone, and I was like, ooh. Honey, I shrunk the Nova, It's like I picked that thing up. I look like a little person playing a trombone,
I think that's good for people to hear, though, because you, like with any creative endeavor, and I think a lot of people can identify during the pandemic of like, having time to try new things or try new projects or needing an artistic outlet and trying things. It's like, and people hear your overdubs and it can be intimidating, I bet, to a lot of people who are like, how am I supposed to make something like that? You didn't know what you were doing when you started. And so much of it is just to do something like that, you got to accept the trial and error part of it, right? And, of course, we can identify with, starting this podcast and having no idea. And the other thing is, like you were saying, is like there's all these unintended or unexpected benefits, right? Mm-hmm. Like you did it because you thought it'd be fun, and then all of a sudden, this is really helping my playing, and I can share it with people on SoundCloud, and it's giving me opportunities to like visit schools. Like it's really, really cool.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was a completely unexpected benefit that I was basically just looking for a fun way to get in shape for the season. It had such incredible unexpected benefits. First of all, I got really comfortable with the instruments that I wasn't that comfortable with, and I started expanding the range of instruments I play. I feel pretty comfortable with my contrabass trombone playing now. There's a statement I never would have thought I would say in my life. Yeah, for people who listen to my overdub, like I remember when the first school that called me was to go do like my trombone at the movies program was University of Alabama. It was John Whitaker, and he said, "Oh, I'm just listening. I'm just sitting around with my grad assistant. We're listening to your overdubs, and we want you to come out and like do a concert of these arrangements." And I was like, "Oh," because when I first
you got to do it in the John Whitaker accent.
Oh.
Roll slide.
Roll slide.
Well, I was like,
anyway, sorry.
I said, "Oh, well, the problem is, John, that a lot of those arrangements I hadn't written out. Like I would just open scores and just start playing stuff until it sounded complete, just for fun. I just was like, oh, and so I wrote out these arrangements, and, when I went down there to play them, I remember one of the kids were like, "Oh, we're so nervous to like play these with you because we can't play them like your recordings." And I was like, "I can't play them like my recordings."
Yeah, that's how that goes.
I was like, "That's not the point. The point, like my recordings are meant to show what's possible, not what's probable."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's meant to push the limit. But now, because I've raised that bar on myself so many times, like when I go back to play something that used to be challenging on alto or bass or whatever, like it's totally changed that perception of it, and it also makes you an incredibly effective arranger when you are recording your arrangements. And then because no one ever sits with my arrangements and says they're not playable, because they're hard, but
Mm-hmm.
I know what can happen and what's probable and that kind of thing. And so, it's an interesting side benefit there. It's a great way to work on your arranging, to record your own, overdub your own arrangements and stuff. And also gives you a tremendous appreciation for the various instruments. I mean, like until I started recording bass trombone regularly, like in those overdubs, I was like, oh man, like the way that instrument responds and the kind of the width of air you need to use is so different than a tenor. And like, if you don't, let alone on contra, man, on contra, you basically have to attack about a 16th note ahead of where you want it to actually land. Totally. So, because you just look at the graph on the recording, you're like, oh yeah, it's hitting about a 16th note late. So.
Well, for our listeners who live under a rock and aren't familiar with your overdubs, they should check out your SoundCloud. They should check out YouTube. They should check out all the places to listen to these. What's your YouTube handle? Want to plug that real quick? And SoundCloud.
Look up for SoundCloud. Just look up Jim Nova, like SoundCloud, / Jim Nova. That'll pull up my page. And yeah, as of yesterday, it's like 1.3 million listens or something like that. It's
good for you.
It's unreal. And then
yeah, I'm looking at it right now. The number one track has over like 248,000 listens.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
228. Yeah.
And then on YouTube, if you just look up James Nova, that will pull it up.
Awesome.
And there's a lot of stuff on there. But if any of your listeners are looking for a funny comparison, look up that very, very first Superman March overdub and listen to that, and then listen to the quote unquote reboot that happens, years later. And, that's the thing, like, anybody who's thinking about trying this overdub stuff, don't be afraid to get messy. Don't be afraid to be messy at first. Like, just jump in and do it. And you'll get through that sort of grease pit time quickly, like where you're just trying to get a footing, and like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing and whatever, and, I have a video on my YouTube page that's like, overdubbing for beginners. And it basically just shows you how to use Audacity, how to calibrate your mic and all that kind of stuff.
That's great.
Will you briefly tell how your recordings eventually were heard by John Williams, one of your heroes, and how he got back to you?
Yeah. Oh, that was one of my favorite moments in my career, actually, was that I was playing a Boston Pops concert that he was conducting. And this was many, many years ago.
War times.
So yeah, before the dark times. And I saw him backstage, and I had played with him for many years in Boston. And actually he came out to Utah and did the Winter Olympics my first season. He re-recorded the theme to the Winter Olympics and stuff. And so And he came to Pittsburgh like my second season or something. And I remember he was puzzled when he saw me because he was like, wait, so you're here now, And I was like, yeah, it's part of the trombone witness protection program. They move us from one orchestra to another, And he kind of laughed. He's like, oh, well, this is an incredible orchestra, congratulations. But after that, I saw him in Boston. This was the last time I actually played with him. It's been a while. And I saw him backstage and I said, hello. And he said, oh, hi, Jim, how's Pittsburgh doing? And how are things there? And I said, oh, good. And I said, because now we're like 3 years into it, I was like, you should know I've been doing these overdub arrangements of like trombone ensemble arrangements of your music and recording them. And they've actually become quite popular. And he said, oh, really? Interesting. He said, how many parts are we talking? Like 4 or 5 parts? And I said, well, actually, some of them are like 18, 19 parts. And his eyebrows went up. He was like, really? He's like, I would really like to hear that. And I said, oh, sure, I'll send you a couple of them, And he said, yeah, I look forward to it. And
inside, you're like screaming.
Oh my God, I was like a little 13-year-old schoolboy, He's just like, what, and I mean, he's obviously a hero of mine and such a warm, kind gentleman, And so I put together the Superman reboot that I did, and Ed Steffen, the timpanist in the San Francisco Symphony, used to be in the Pittsburgh Symphony. He recorded all the percussion parts and stuff, but I wrote, it was like 18 trombone parts or something, contrabass trombones, soprano trombones, everything, and then I also sent him the Green Hornet just for something that he didn't write that, so I sent him just a little, like a CD of those 2 tracks, because I didn't want to like overwhelm him or anything. And I sent it to him in the summer of 2015, and that's important because that was the summer that they were recording the Force Awakens score in LA. And, I sent it to him, and like 2 or 3 weeks later, I get a handwritten letter from him, hand addressed too. And he's basically, says, I can, you've done incredible work here, and, it's simply, it was just really effusive and very, very brief, but just the fact that he took the time to like write me a couple sentences, it's probably 2 minutes out of his day, but like it means that, it's obviously framed in my studio and what an incredible, moment. And the fact that he took the time to like listen to those tracks, and, I would love to know what he thought, like in more depth, he's probably like, what? I didn't even know the trombone could do that, but, so it was incredibly powerful moment for me. That kind of inspired me to keep going on that whole Star Wars album that I eventually made, because that album didn't start out like I didn't have a plan to make a Star Wars album. It was like I was doing some Star Wars tracks that I liked, and then I started to realize, it's like there's a shape forming here, like there's an arc forming here of like, a story, through the, like, sort of as the trombone choir as the Greek chorus telling the story kind of thing, So that really, man, that took years. That took years to make. So,
and it's if you're living under a rock and haven't heard it, you should, because it's pretty epic. And it's one of those things you can play. It's a good first thing to play for non-trombonists. If you're like, oh, what's the trombone sound like? And you're like, oh, it can do this. I mean, it's kind of setting their expectations pretty high, but it's something they've heard before. It's a really cool thing to play for people. So I would like to take you into the rapid fire lounge, if that is okay with you.
Rapid fire, rapid answers. That's the whole idea here. Sometimes the rapid on both ends doesn't quite materialized, but that's the idea.
I'll do my best.
Let's be real. No one ever does these rap. No one ever does these.
I decided after the last one I wanted to preface it with that, because I think it would be really cool if we actually got like rapid on both ends.
I'll do my best.
Stop trying to mute Jim. Okay. A popular one, we always ask advice to your 18-year-old self.
Calm down. Just like don't overwater the plants, like water them, take care of them, let them grow, let them flower at their own speed. Don't be in a hurry.
That's a great one. The biggest challenge you've had in your career, what's the hardest thing you've had to overcome?
Imposter syndrome. Just sometimes feeling like, who the hell, I'm just this kid from Connecticut. What the hell am I doing here? Why am I, what is this? And just being able to pick myself up, brush myself off and move forward, and accept that failure is part of success.
That which leads to the next question. What does success mean to you?
Feeling a balance of happiness, but curiosity and never resting totally on your accomplishments, always trying to move forward. And Glenn Dodson said to me when he retired from the Philadelphia Orchestra, somebody asked me, are you going to stop playing? And he's like, no. He's like, the day I stop playing is this day I stop getting better. And that just always struck me really. And he never stopped playing. So just always trying to, to me, success is being happy with what you do, but also finding ways to channel that curious part of yourself that wants to learn new things and learn and experience new stuff that you get better at. That feeds back into the stuff you already do well.
Favorite Star Wars character?
Oh, man.
Jar Jar Binks.
That's really, really tough one because there's so many characters I relate to. I probably have to go with the boyhood one of Han Solo. Such a
can't go wrong.
Because think about the whole car thing with me, like tinkering with cars and like race car driving and the Kessel Run and all that stuff and like the swagger of him and his great one-liners and I must have hit it pretty close to the mark to get her all riled up like that. I can't. It's hard, but as a sort of interesting character, dimensional and redemptive character, Anakin and Vader, Darth Vader, like that. I made a whole album about the guy, so I find that interesting, that whole journey of how he has this one moment that turns him and he almost can't, especially like that moment when Anakin's mother dies in his arms. I'm just like, obviously
spoiler alert.
I can kind of relate to that. Not that my mom was killed by Tusken Raiders, but like, but just to, just can really. So I'd say that, sorry if that's not a good enough answer, or if it's not concise enough.
No, that's a great answer. And in talks with you over adult beverages, you've connected. That was another area of your way to excise your grief growing up was, escaping into that world too. Yeah. So
definitely
the people that are like, oh, he just really likes Star Wars. No, it's like, it was really meaningful to you in your life.
Well, especially the music. I feel like, John Williams has brought it every time, like his, to me, the music tells the story better than the actual movies does, he's
incredible.
Yeah. The amount of, especially when you, like, that's been one of the great joys about doing those overdubs is like crawling into those scores and like realizing, oh, that is that impactful because he's got this harmony stacked in this way. And if you did it any other way, it wouldn't work, like just finding out those little clues and stuff. Like, here's the one that really I love is the number of times he tucks in the Imperial March in the middle of a passage that's so buried in harmony. Yeah. And like, you wouldn't even know it unless you were looking at a score, but he does it. And he probably knows that that very few people are going to find that out. But the fact that he sort of left that Easter egg. Yeah. Exactly.
I love that story of how they're like scoring E.T. and they were trying to line it up and they just couldn't line it up.
Added some more
and then they're just like, like just write exactly what you want to write and we'll make the film fit you.
Yeah.
Your score.
Yeah, that doesn't happen for anybody.
No, Spielberg knew though. He knew. Spielberg knew. So
what's your favorite part about playing in the Pittsburgh Symphony brass section?
There's two things that are tied, I think. And one is that when I first got to the orchestra, I remember the amount of energy and just the sheer amount of sound that the orchestra puts out. And I say orchestra, not just brass section, it's such an incredible high amount of energy that the orchestra will gladly sacrifice technical perfection for excitement. It will gladly sacrifice it. It just will lay it on the altar of excitement, And my first season in the orchestra, I remember we played something, I think it was, we were recording Symphony Fantastique, and I just started laughing when we stopped because I just couldn't believe it, how much sound was happening, And Craig Knox said to me, "Yeah, Jim, there's no regular season games in the PSO. Every game's the playoffs, And I just, that's on a playing level, that's what I love. But on a personal level, I just love how much we're like brothers and sisters, like we just sit on, so many of my students come to concerts and be like, you guys are always like laughing back there, you're always like sort of smiling or whatever. And it's like, there's such a great camaraderie there. And that combination of like going for things and knowing that your colleagues are your brothers and your sisters, like that there's no, you can totally go for something and fall totally flat on your face. And there's never any feeling of like, oh, mom just punched dad at the dinner table. There's none of that stuff. It's just, as we all know, there's plenty of orchestras that out there where, if you flop on something, it's like, ooh, whereas in the PSO, I never feel that way. I never feel that way. As long as people are like going for it and exciting, those are my two favorite things, on a personal level and an artistic level.
That's a special thing. And yeah, I mean, the vibe is real. It's a really special environment. I have to say, of like all the major orchestras I've ever played with, it's like one of the most comfortable environments to walk into as a sub. And it's like very warm and encouraging. It's not vibey. It's a real special thing. And I think that exists in Pittsburgh in general, which I really noticed moving here.
I think the vibe here is like when a sub comes in to play, it's like we're expecting you to play like a colleague, so why wouldn't we treat you as a colleague? Like we want you to feel as comfortable as any one of us, so why would we not treat you that way? Mm-hmm. Because you're actually at a disadvantage, so why would we not try to help you overcome that? Mm-hmm. and so. Especially me, because I was a freelancer for in Boston and I had plenty of full, orchestra jobs and stuff, but like, I just remember what that was like, always coming in and being like, oh, I'm sitting in a section that has sat together for 20 years or whatever, and I'm trying to catch up, like why? So when I'm in the reverse role now, I'm like, oh, why would I not treat you like that?
It's a little weird though. 'Cause like, I don't understand why for the first couple rehearsals you told me I wasn't allowed to make eye contact with you. I just find that a little strange after such a sensitive thing you just
That's said. More of an Albanian thing.
Anyways.
That's more of an Albanian thing. It's kind of like, you have to pass the ritual of fire first. But no, I'm just kidding.
That is definitely not true. It's always been very nice. A couple more. Most memorable musical experience. Tough one.
Oh, man, that is tough. I mean, one of the most incredible ones was playing the tuba mirum solo in the Musikverein in Vienna with the PSO on tour, and my wife and my dad and my stepmom were in the audience. That is like, talk about a culmination of so many different things. Lindsay said it was the most.
Is that the one from the balcony?
Yeah, and it's always in the balcony. For those of your listeners that don't realize, like whenever we do the Mozart Requiem, all I play is the tuba mirum, and I play it from a balcony down on the orchestra with a spotlight on me, because he wants this whole kind of voice of God imagery. Who knew the voice of God was an Albanian from Connecticut? But
I did.
Yeah. But because what's crazy about that concert was that, first of all, it was the most nervous Lindsay's ever been in her life, she said. And my parents, my dad and my stepmom, their flight got canceled in Boston. There was a huge snowstorm, and they caught the next flight. Like they had to wait a whole day, and they caught the next flight to Vienna, and they landed in Vienna 2 hours before the concert. And went straight to the concert, and like, you know, my dad was exhausted and my stepmom were exhausted, but they were like, my cousin was in the audience. Like all his family was there, and it went great.
That's awesome.
It went great. I may or may not have a bootleg of that performance, but
I won't tell anybody.
It went wonderfully, and you know, that's definitely up there. That's definitely got to be up there. I mean, I remember I called my dad when it got scheduled. I was like, "So, Dad, I think you kind of need to come to this one. You know, like this is the city that this is the city that Mozart lived in, and Mahler conducted on this stage. Like, I think you kind of need to come to this." And he was like, "Well, I would be there." You know, so
it's
a good one.
That is a perfect. Okay, last rapid fire question, and this is actually a real rapid fire question. Money is no object. You could own and drive regularly any car in the world. Which would it be?
Any car in the world. Porsche GT2. That is like that's like their super,
Google that.
That's their like, it's a Porsche 911. It's like turbocharged. I mean, it's insane. The car is absolutely insane, and I think they go for around I think they go for around $500,000. I'm not sure, but you know,
I thought
it's not actually.
Nova.
Oh no! You had to go there, didn't you?
I apologize,
man.
I was just going to say, from what you're making from this podcast interview, I mean, you could at least, you know, put a down payment on.
Yeah, I could buy a car. I could buy a stem cap for the front tire, right? Right now.
Okay. What do students not do enough of that they need to do more of?
Remember why they got into music in the first place. I mean,
it's a callback to your situation. That's good.
Yeah. I mean, of course, recording yourself, you'd think, oh, I'm the overdub guy. Isn't that the, you know, of course, recording yourself is a close second, but that doesn't matter if you don't actually connect to the reasons and sentiments that got you into music in the first place. Like, that's where you get into trouble, I think, is if you stop. Because like, what student do you know that you're like, oh, you went into music. Why did you go into music? Well, I went into music so that I could play really well in tune and in time with a good articulation. You know, no student says that. You know, I mean, that's not the reason you go into music. You go into music because you love it and you want to say something, you want to experience it. You know, it's something that brought you there. You know, so that's just.
Well, I gotta say, you surprised me. I thought it was going to be recording, but I appreciate your answer.
Yeah, I mean, because I know, you know, I mean, obviously, I know you guys and have listened to your previous episodes, and I know a lot of your guests say that, and I actually totally agree. But if you don't know what the reasons and sentiments you got into music are, then what's the point of recording yourself?
Yeah,
you know, then
that's good.
You know,
it's like sound clip worthy.
That'll save me time.
Is that going to be my quote?
We'll see. We'll see. You had a lot of good ones. Well, Jim, I mean, I just have to say, and we've talked a lot about, you know, doing this and everything. And I just want people to know that you've always been, and I've told you this in private, but you've always been a very good friend to me. And even when you haven't had to, and I know you'll never tell anyone this, but you've always been really supportive of my career. And just, you know, when someone's a friend, when they do all the little stuff they don't have to do, like you've helped me with car problems, borrowing mutes at the last second. Like, I could name a million things, letting me crash last minute. And I just really want to thank you for that. And also, you hold the record of every friend I've ever known. You're number one in first place for being the best and fastest replier to texts in my universe. I don't care. Jim could be in the middle of a concert. He is going to respond. Sometimes I text him and I just stare at my phone and I just like count. And like, it'll be like,
yeah, it's too bad you're not on an iPhone. Then you'd see the three little dots, you know, like.
That's true. Well, yeah.
What's dangerous? What's dangerous is now I have the Apple Watch. So, and you know, I don't know if you can see like what's the screen on it. Right? Of course, you know. Yeah. But I have the Apple Watch, and like so now I can even text while I'm literally in the middle of a concert. So,
I like when we were playing in some rehearsals, and you got like the too much noise warning or whatever.
Yeah,
your environment is too loud.
Yeah, I know. I think my watch gave up. It sort of was like, all right, this is happening every day. We're not gonna do this anymore. You know. I was like, I should email Apple and be like, All right, you have 100 decibel limit. Can we set a higher limit for that, like a PSO volume limit? Oh man. Well, that's very kind.
Jim,
of you
it
to
was
say,
awesome. And
Yeah, don't let it get to your.
my sentiments are the same. You're a great guy and a great friend, and have let me crash many times as well. So, I mean, the feelings are similar to Sebastian's. So, thank you so much for coming on. And it's been a long time in the making. You know, when we started the podcast, you were one of the first names that came to mind, and we wanted to do this in person, but because of the service that we use, it's actually easier this way. So, you know, it worked out either way, and that's what we're glad for.
Well, I mean, and let me return the sentiments. I mean, you guys are such good friends, and you know, this Third Coast retreat you guys have created is such an incredible atmosphere. And you know, I always encourage all my students to audition there. And you know, having been there with you guys as an artist, you know, I it's the real deal. It's the real deal. It's a very unique setting and warm, inviting place to study and play, and such an incredible, exciting thing you guys are doing there. And I know I know how hard it is to pull off those kinds of, how much organization and things that go on behind the scenes those take. So it's incredible you guys keep doing that every year and now, especially with the past few years, what we've had to deal with. And you know, but no, you guys are the best and real great friends too. So right back at you. So
Thanks, Jim.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Jim. And we teach at Duquesne.
Oh yeah,
awesome. Come study with us at Duquesne. Okay, I did it.
That's right. Mr. Vera and I teach at Duquesne. That's right. And it's great to have you there. And Nick has been a guest artist there.
If you like
the honey and vinegar situation, you know, someone brings.
I don't want to know.
I like.
no, someone brings sweetness. Someone brings. Hey, Sebastian.
What's up?
What's better than sitting down with Jim Nova?
Not much, my friend.
He's just a swell individual.
He's been a very good friend, and you know, I've learned a ton from just being around him and getting to play with him. And you know, everyone we talk to has their own path and unique story. He's been so supportive of the podcast, which we very much appreciate. We joke about there being a thing called the Nova bump. Like, you can look at our stats, and like earlier on when he would post like something on Facebook advertising the podcast, you would see this little spike, you know, and we called it the Nova bump.
Well, also he's always one of the first people to listen to the podcast when we release it. Yeah, so I have a little story time about Jim Nova that I wanted to tell. So my first time visiting Pittsburgh, I was coming out to visit you, and you were still living in New York, but you had some work in Pittsburgh with opera, and you were still doing that back and forth. And so you didn't have like a permanent place to stay. You were always just kind of renting a place for the time that you needed to be there. And so I was kind of left up to my own devices to find housing. And Hakeem Bilal, who we love and treasure as a human being and a player,
recently joined us on the After Hours.
Yes, he did. Recently, he did. And he said, "Oh, we have an extra bedroom. You can stay in our place," which is like an extra bedroom. That's a relatively foreign thought in a New York City person's life. And so the first night I went and stayed with Hakeem, who I didn't know. I think I'd met, but I didn't really know either. So Hakeem had me over, stayed in his place. What ended up happening is like Jim Nova wanted to hang out, and a lot of the hangs end up happening at Nova's, which is not very close to where Hakeem was. And I didn't have a car, and Jim, not even knowing me, we had met once, said, "Well, why don't you just come stay with me in Lindsay?" So that's just the type of guy he is. I want to tell that as a story. He's just a type of person that invites who's somewhat of a stranger to stay in his house. I mean, I wasn't a complete stranger, but pretty darn close to it. He hedged his bets and it paid off. I turned out to not be a serial killer, so it worked out. And I just appreciated that, and it meant a lot.
You do fit the profile with that beard.
Hey, you fit the profile with that gorgeous face.
Got me again.
Profile of the victim.
Well, Nick, you had a very special week, and I actually haven't really gotten to talk to you about this in detail yet. So someone that's very close to you and very close to the trombone retreat, of course, had an amazing career milestone. Your wife made her, who is a conductor and pianist and basically does everything, composer. You could list a million things that she is capable of, made her Metropolitan Opera conducting debut. And you were in the orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
How amazing is that?
So first of all, just for people who don't know, my wife's name is Daniela Candelari. And so there's a couple things that were amazing about it. She is the first conductor from what is now ex-Yugoslavia to conduct at the Met, which meant there were a lot of people from her corner of the world that were there too, and that were very beyond proud, because it's a big achievement to conduct at a place like the Met. And this friend of ours who's Serbian, like my wife, came up and said right when she walked on the podium, she just started sobbing, just because she was just like, this is such an important moment for our people. And to have her do it, I think meant a lot too, because they're friends. But like that report came from a couple of people who are from ex-Yugoslavia, that they just started weeping immediately when she came out.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And so from my perspective, well, first of all, I knew she was going to nail it. She nails everything she does. It was a very complex score. It's called Eurydice. It's a newish opera by Matthew Aucoin. It's maybe 3 years old, so I would consider that pretty darn new. And it's very thickly written, very dense music. And she had it memorized, number one.
Yeah, she did.
But number two, her calmness on the podium. I know inside she was very nervous, but she didn't show that. She showed such calmness. And that's the report I got back from so many people in the Met Orchestra. But it was an interesting moment for me because I'd never played with her in an orchestra setting. I played with her in
Oh, you'd never played with her as conducting you before?
No.
Wow.
And so while the bass trombone part is very hard for this opera, like it's not like I didn't care. I mean, that'd be a ridiculous thing to say. But my focus was so much on her and just kind of like sending good vibes. Like, you got this. And during the intermission, I thought of my friend Liz, who's principal oboe of Atlanta Symphony. And she posted a number of years ago a screenshot of her Fitbit, and she was taking an audition, and let's say her resting heart rate was somewhere in the 60, 65. During the audition, her heart rate got up to 180.
That's not good.
But it was more of kind of like a PSA saying like, hey, nerves are more than just feeling nervous. It does have a physical effect on your body. So don't be shocked if you suddenly are playing and you feel your heart beating out of your chest. And I didn't even notice it until the intermission. And then I started noticing, like, in the second half, my resting heart rate, I wish I had my Apple Watch on, but my resting heart rate must have been around 120 for the entire opera. Because I was just sitting there like so nervous for her, wanting her to crush it. And she did. But like when the opera ended, I was just like, oh God, she nailed it. Thank God. She was amazing. And that's all the reports from everybody.
So you might have been more nervous than her the whole time.
Maybe. But I crashed for like a day and a half afterwards. I mean, I was so exhausted after that. It was really intense. And today was my first day back since that performance. And so many people came up to me and said like, it was so incredible, but like she did such a phenomenal job. And like, it was just like astonishing. And good friend of mine, he's one of the trumpet players, Ray Riccomini, came up to me today and said that it was one of the highlights. It was the highlight of the season and one of the highlights of his career.
What?
Yeah.
That's
and
amazing.
He said when he thinks back on that performance, like even though it was only a couple days ago, but he says he gets like intense goosebumps because he said the level at which she came onto that podium and crushed it was just so unbelievable. She went up there and it was just 100 out of 100. Perfect. And I mean, I agree, but I also always in the back of my mind, I'm like, well, even though you agree and you do like have a right to opinion. You're like, people aren't going to take you at face value because you're the husband and you have bias and like all this stuff. But it's like, you know, I've known forever she's a total badass, but now more of the world knows. So it was a remarkable experience.
I'm so glad you got to do that and got to be playing in the orchestra. I mean, that's a lifetime memory that you'll always have and that you always got to spend together. And there's a really great photo taken of you guys, and I think posted on the Met Opera Musicians page. And it's just really, I mean, stories like this. Everyone has a story. Everyone has a journey. And this is just the beginning of her career, but what a milestone. And we know how hard she's been working and always believing in herself. And, you know, every time you see her, she's doing something or she's working on something or she has plans. But I think the biggest takeaway here is clearly conducting the Third Coast Trombone Retreat Trombone Choir is a stepping stone to the Metropolitan Opera podium. I mean, would you agree?
Well, it's where the tires meet the road. It's where, as you said, steel sharpens steel. It's where, it's where the gladiators find if they're worth their weight in salt.
Where conductors test their mettle.
Do you got the grit
to conduct the Third Coast Trombone Retreat Trombone Choir?
Oh, you can conduct a 21st century score, but can you conduct Achieved as a Glorious Work?
Nothing makes me feel better than to know that she is way too famous and a big deal to come work for us ever again. So
I know.
But yeah, if I didn't have big rehearsal the next morning, I would have been there too. And I'm over the moon for her, and I just can't wait to follow what happens next. And
I know it's the world is her oyster, truly. And the good thing is like, you know, we all make jokes about conductors, and a lot of them are freaking true, you know, about the egos and the, you know, hey, I could do this job better than you. But like, Daniela is just one of those people that everyone agrees she's not an ego forward person, and she has the chops to back it up. And so she's super nice and great to work with. So it's like, that's the full package right there, you know?
Oh, you got to give it time. You got to give it time for that conductor ego swagger to come, you know?
Yeah. She walks in the room like Meryl Streep in Devil Wears Prada and throws her fur. Hang the mink on a wooden hanger and call Delmonico's.
No eye contact. I actually give Daniela crap about that every time I see her. I'm just like, oh, you're starting to get that conductor swagger. I saw the way you walked in here. Like anytime she says just like anything, you're just like, oh, okay, maestro, okay.
Yes, maestro.
Excuse me.
Maestro.
Well, that is awesome. And congratulations to you and your family, and more to come. So Nick, it is Christmas time again.
Simply having a wonderful Christmas time.
We are simply having one, and it is nice, and especially this year we have holiday concerts coming back. You know, many people playing like the Nutcracker and holiday pops concerts. You may have school concerts playing holiday music. Everyone loves to hear music, especially brass music around the holidays. Everyone's gainfully employed, typically more employed than we normally are, and it's just a nice time of year. And honestly, it's some of my favorite concerts. This also brings about my favorite time of year to execute one of my favorite moves in concerts. If you time this perfectly, it's a special moment that'll make a colleague laugh at the most awkward time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very fulfilling. It's my favorite thing to do every year. So Nick, if you follow these steps for perfect precision, you will pull this off.
Okay, I'm ready.
First, wait until the most over-the-top, sentimental, and cheesy moment of the concert. There's always one. It's usually a slower ballad. Don't worry, you probably won't be playing at that point. During a nice long rest. And this is when you scout. You scout it out. You want to choose your target.
So let me ask you one thing. So like, just from the outside, looking in. If there's a children's choir present, I probably want to wait till the children's choir is singing, because that's probably going to be a sentimental moment.
Children's choirs are very good in this situation. If you're lucky enough to have a children's choir, let that emerge in the texture. And this is when you want to choose your target. So this could either be someone in your section, probably the person either next to you or the chair over. If you want to go for bonus points, you go for someone that is maybe across the room but is in your eye line. And you'll have to execute it different, and I'll get to that in a moment. And when you find that person, you gently stare at them. Just try to make eye contact with them. At first, they may assume you're looking past them, but just hold it there. Be confident. Hold that gaze until until your eyes meet. Once your eyes meet, you pause again for when it's just a little bit uncomfortable that you're still looking at them. And this is the money part. This is where you really got to pull it off. You keep a straight, emotionless face during this really special, thoughtful moment. You hold that eye contact, and that's when you slowly say, "Merry Christmas, Nicholas." Wow. And this is key here. You need to use their full name. I don't care if you've always called them Nick. It's going to be Nicholas. If it's Chris, it's going to be Christopher. If it's Pete, it's going to be Peter. You need to use
John, it's going to be
full
Jonathan.
name. If Jonathan is actually your name, that's not everyone's name. Some people spell their name with an H, and they're just John, and that's the full name.
Nope. I think that's a conspiracy theory.
Now, for a higher score, if you made eye contact with that special person across the room, and you mouth the words in silence, that is guaranteed to make them lose it embarrassingly in the middle of the most sentimental part of the concert.
What about just a gentle hand over heart with?
You don't want to overdo it. I think the power is in its simplicity and like over the top seriousness, and it's important. You got to keep that straight face and confidence about it, like you really mean it. And I encourage you, choose a new target each night. No one's safe, because even if someone witnesses it one night, you can still get them the next night. No one's ever ready.
You could choose a new spot, because Christmas concerts are chock-a-block full of sentimental moments.
Exactly. So take that gift with you. That is my gift to you, Trombone Retreat listener, during the holiday season. And that is how Christmas was fun. If you enjoyed the podcast, tell a friend. And please consider being a patron on patreon.com/tromboneretreat, and also leaving us a rating and review on iTunes, as it helps us out quite a bit. Follow us at Trombone Retreat on all the social medias, and our website, tromboneretreat.com, where you can also join our mailing list. On Instagram, follow Nick at basstrombone444, and myself at js.vera. And as always,
when you're feeling gloomy and down,
put on a nice pair of corduroy pants.
Hop in your 77 Toyota Camry.
Pop that trunk.
Pull out your safety blanket.
Someone's got to end this. Have a nice picnic.
With someone that would look you in the eyes and say Merry Christmas over a sentimental moment.
Or Happy Holidays. And go ahead and retreat yourself.
Retreat thyself.